airplane.
Well, that was a movie.
This is gonna be an interesting review. Sometimes I know what I'm going to say before I start filming it, sometimes I don't. Hello, welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm giving my first thoughts on Edgar Wright's new movie, Last Night in Soho. The film is starring Thomasin McKenzie, Anya Taylor-Joy, and Matt Smith. The plot follows a young woman who moves to London to pursue her dream of being a fashion designer. She makes new friends, new enemies, there's awkward situations, she ends up having to move out. It's all fairly normal until it's not. She begins having dreams and visions of things that happened in that exact same spot in the 1960s. It's creepy, it's weird, and it's also very Edgar Wright. This movie is marketed as a horror thriller, and it is in its own way, but it's not the standard horror or thriller that we're used to. Edgar Wright has his own unique style that he brings to it that changes things up a little bit. There's some positives and some negatives to that. I think that things that could have been a lot scarier if done by a different director were much more exciting and upbeat, if that makes sense, because of Edgar Wright's direction and music choice, honestly. There's certain situations that in a typical horror movie, you would have this scary, pounding violin soundtrack coming down on you like Be Afraid, but because it's Edgar Wright, there is this upbeat, exciting, fast, happy oftentimes 1960s soundtrack. This movie isn't necessarily your typical horror, and I think people that are more expecting that could be very disappointed by that. But if you're going into this expecting an Edgar Wright experience, you may enjoy that more because the story is still extremely well written, as his stories always are. The directing is fantastic, the music choice, the editing, the acting, all of it is borderline flawless, as his movies always are. He has such almost a mechanical approach to making film, but not cold. Like Stanley Kubrick is like mechanical because it's all perfect, but it's cold, it's harsh. Edgar Wright is mechanical, but it's like the Tin Man because it's got heart too. And that's the best way to describe his directing and editing and storytelling style, is that it's rigid in its perfectionistic tendencies, but it's got oomph to it, it's got heart to it, it's got warmth to it. Everything is so perfect. Every little minute detail is flawless, but it's not really horror. People may disagree with me, but I'm uncomfortable just putting in that category as horror. And maybe that's just because we've pigeonholed horror into such a painful subgenre box. And so maybe that's why I'm uncomfortable calling it horror, but it still should be considered that, just in a looser definition of that. But I'm saying it's not because it's not what I expected. I don't know what I expected, but it certainly wasn't what I got. Not to say it's bad. This movie was still very, very good. I just, like I said at the beginning, I don't know what I think of this movie yet. I'm going to be verbally processing this on camera right now because it was quite the ride, but what was it exactly? It's going to be hard to get into any of this really without getting into spoilers, but I'll do my best to just say some basic details about this movie first, and I'll get into spoilers, I'm sure, pretty quick here. But first of all, Thomasin McKenzie, great actress. I've been a huge fan since Jojo Rabbit, knew that she was going to be a star, and soon. I didn't know how fast it was going to happen. I think this is her coming out party. She was really good in this. Anya Taylor-Joy is also tremendous in her role in this. I think both of them really carry this movie. The rest of the actors are all good. There's nobody that's bad in this movie. There was never a moment where I was like, they stand out because they're bad. Even in the smallest roles, I noticed actors doing their jobs well. Like, it's got the Weasley twins in a tiny, small role. They just needed a double, I'm assuming, so that they cast them. They needed two people that looked the same for a quick change. And I'm forgetting their names. Hold on. It's James and Oliver Phelps. And even just that small moment, I was like, they did good. They did well. And so even the smallest, like 1 second cameos, I was going, the acting in this movie is good. Soundtrack choice, fantastic. Edgar Wright knows everything when it comes to making a good soundtrack, getting a good compilation of music and putting it together to match the scene, with editing, having things in the scene time up with the beat of the song. You've got this flashing light that's constant throughout this movie in various scenes where it flashes red and blue, and you'll often see that that's in time with the beat. And it's just little things like that with the editing, the sound mixing. It really captures you and brings you into the story. There's also a lot of CGI that they use in this movie. I've often talked about on this channel that I'm not a big fan of CGI. I think that it should only be used when absolutely necessary. Oftentimes people could be using practical effects, but they use CGI instead, and this uses a lot of CGI, but I think it's used artistically, I think it's used intelligently, and I think it's used absolutely when necessary. There's many times in this movie that they could have used CGI to do things, and I think they were actually using camera tricks and visual tricks to fool you into thinking that something was happening when it wasn't actually. There was still definitely a lot of CGI in there, but I think it was well placed and looked good. Because like I said, there's times in there that I think they use practical effects, but I frankly don't know. Because the CGI was so good and the practical effects were so good, it was hard to find the overlap in there, which is rare. In most movies, it's jarring and you can tell from a mile away, and it wasn't the case in this. Getting to the story, without getting into any spoilers, like I was saying earlier, it definitely went in a different direction than I expected. Part of that being good, part of that being bad. I'd say mostly good. Like I said, Edgar Wright's writing is always enjoyable. I think one of the best things about the writing was that it's from the perspective of the girl, and most of the important characters in this movie are women, and is written, from my point of view, extremely well. I was shocked because it's written by a man. Edgar Wright is a man, and it's written so well that I admit I'm a man. I'm admitting that now, I'm a man. It felt like a woman wrote it. At times. Not the entire time, but at times. Based on the main character's reaction things, the way her friends or enemies were talking about her and stuff, like her classmates, her roommates and stuff, just the way everything flowed, the way things were shown, it felt like it had a feminine touch to it. And I'm shocked that Edgar Wright wrote something that well. Like, I know Edgar Wright's amazing at writing. I know he is. I really love his writing, but I was just impressed. I'll put it that way. I was impressed. And I do appreciate him going through these different genres. As far as I can tell, he's doing a tour of the genres, like he did with comedy, where it's like he parodied horror, then he parodied action, then he parodied apocalypse. Now he's going through and like, oh, well, here's an actual serious action movie. Now here's an actual serious horror movie, and he's going through proving that he doesn't just make fun of these, he actually can make them too, and I really do appreciate that. It reminds me a lot of Baby Driver in how he wrote and made this movie of, I'm going to use tropes on purpose, things that are cliche, things that are overused, but I'm going to use them so well that you don't mind it, and that you won't get mad when you see it, and that's what he did again in this. He did it maybe just a little bit more successfully, I'd say, in Baby Driver. I think Baby Driver was a more complete film just on first watch than Last Night in Soho, but it was still the same basic principle that he was working with here. I'm going to prove that not only can I make this, I can make it well with the limitations you've set up, as well as showing that I am an absolute student of film. Edgar Wright, I think, is just further solidifying his place as one of the greatest directors of all time, and certainly one of the best in the business today. So, Last Night in Soho is a definite recommendation for me. I can't say that I know exactly how I feel about it yet, but I know it was good. How good? I can't decide yet. I'm going to be processing this for a while. I will say the ending was my least favorite part. Not the climax, the actual ending. The rest of the movie was good, but that ending, I feel like it missed the landing a little bit. So that's just my opinion though. I don't know how many other people feel about that. This guy's, what the fuck, security? What's up?
Just checking, man.
Alright. Anyway, I don't want to say the ending was necessarily bad either. I just didn't, maybe it was. I don't know. How do I feel about it? It's such a small thing to focus on too, because there's one scene, but it didn't fit. And I don't know why. I don't know if I'm missing something, but it didn't fit to me and I didn't enjoy it. But like I said, just one scene. The rest of the movie was really good. It's still a good movie. Still definitely a positive experience, like I said. Definitely recommend it. I'm not sure exactly what I'd give it yet, probably somewhere in the 7s. You just have to go into it expecting it to be Edgar Wright. Don't expect, you know, your typical slasher movie or your typical horror movie or whatever you were led to believe this movie was. I was kind of misled because I thought it was going to be something very different than what it was. And that's partially my fault, because I know who Edgar Wright is. I know his style. But I was expecting something else than what it was. So try to go in open-minded. It's not going to be typical in any way, because he doesn't do typical. He plays with the cliches, but he's not going to be boring. He's not going to be basic. He's not going to do what everybody else is doing. So even when he's toying with those cliches, he's going to use them differently, and he's going to use them creatively. So that's what I think, spoiler free. I'm going to get into spoilers now, try to sort out my thoughts about this, because as much as I can say it was good, I think it's a 7, I don't know what I fully feel about it yet. So if you want to process it with me, go ahead and stick around. But if not, please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you're new here. Also, if you haven't seen it yet, I do recommend it. Go check it out. But if you've already seen it and you want to let me know what you think, let me know in the comments below. Thanks, guys. Bye. So, spoilers. Yeah. I think Edgar Wright being his own unique style was really a treat, but also frustrating at the same time, because you've got, if you haven't seen it yet, she's being haunted by these men, these ghosts of men, these like faceless men haunting her, that we end up finding out were actually murdered in the building that she lives in. And these men are coming after her, and they're your typical kind of ghosty figures, faceless zombie type looking things. And there's many scenes that they pop up, and it wasn't ever scary. There was nothing in this movie that ever was spine-chilling or goosebump worthy or even just a jump scare. And they went for it. They tried it. But it never worked. It always felt like it was just a little bit off, one step away from being scary. And I think part of that was the music, which I love the music. Like I said, I love the soundtrack. I love how he used it to create this world. It was so enjoyable to look at. It's so enjoyable to watch. But there's nothing scary about happy, upbeat 60s music. And so when you're getting chased by these zombie ghost things, and you're playing "Always Something There to Remind Me," and it's like, it's not like a creepy sounding version of the song, or like a slowed down, high pitched, tinkling, like horror movie version of the sound. No, it was just the normal song. And I'm like, I'm not scared. I'm not in the mood to be scared. I'm in the mood to, like, it's a action adventure movie. That's what it felt like. And that's not necessarily bad, but I thought that they were going for scary, and it wasn't. It wasn't ever remotely scary, and that's a shame to me. That was a missed opportunity to me, because it could have been so scary, but I can't fully explain why it wasn't other than that. The music was definitely a big part of it. I think another big part of it was just, I don't know if the editing was slightly off, but I did notice at one point she turns the corner, and then there's a group of them all standing in the room, and there's that duh sound, and the duh was mistimed slightly to me. It felt like it was a little bit early, because it goes duh and then you see them, maybe because it's like, oh, shocking, and there's the visual. But I was just like, the duh didn't work, and then there's the visual, and the ghostly figures weren't remotely scary to look at. They were bland. If you're going to approach this movie, I think it's much more approachable and much more enjoyable as the story, as a visual story, as an adventure, as a mystery even. But it's not remotely enjoyable as a horror to me. I think you have to go in with the right mindset of thinking that this is not adventure, but like, I guess mystery is the best way to put it, because she's trying to figure out what's going on. You're wondering the whole movie, is she insane? Because she sees her dead mom places, and then when she goes there, she's in a very stressful environment. There's a lot going on. Maybe she's just schizophrenic and she's just seeing stuff that's not actually happening. But then there's clues here and there, like, oh, she's got a hickey that came from her dream last night, so maybe stuff is actually going on. But they're like, well, maybe something else is happening when she's having these visions. Like, what is going on? And so you don't really know, and then when it's revealed that it is actually happening, you think, I guess they never actually reveal that, but it keeps going, so you're assuming that it's real and it's actually happening. Then there's the twist that the old lady that is renting out the place to her was actually the killer that killed all the people, which I liked and disliked, and here's why. I liked because it was a shock to me. I didn't think the story was going that direction. I liked it because it was different. It was unique feeling. I liked it because it was portrayed well. I didn't like it because it made the zombies following her make no sense. Because this whole time they're being like creepy and going like, "Ugh," and then even right before the reveal that they're not bad, or at least they're not trying to be bad or whatever, they're all grabbing at her, like pulling on her and stuff, and then they go, "Kill her, she killed us." But maybe they weren't trying to make them sympathetic, because they were trying to make her sympathetic too, by going like, it's not her fault that she killed all of them because her life was hard. Which isn't a reason to kill people, but okay. It's not like they were raping her. She was a prostitute. And so it's like, they're not good people, but neither was she, because she killed them. She had a choice to do that, and she made that choice. So she's not entirely sympathetic, but you can have sympathy for her because her life was hard. And then those guys, you can have sympathy toward them because they died. They were murdered. Were they good people? Probably not. But they were murdered. Nobody deserves to be murdered. It kind of was wishy-washy on like, how am I supposed to have my allegiances here? How am I supposed to feel about this? It just got kind of like convoluted at the end. And then the actual ending itself, like I was saying, I didn't like it. So you've got they set the apartment on fire by accident. The old lady stabs the dude in the stomach and he's bleeding out. Granted, you don't die instantaneously from being stabbed in the stomach. It can take a while, so it's possible that he survived. And then she poisons the girl. Granted, she only took like a sip of the drink and then she did throw up, but she's poisoned and seemingly dying. The place is burning down. They get dragged out by firemen. They put the oxygen on her. And then we have a flash forward to her putting on a fashion show. And everybody loves it, and she's a big success. The only way that ending doesn't suck is if that was like her hallucination at the end of the movie as she's dying because she's inhaled too much smoke and because she was poisoned. If that's the actual ending and that's actually how it happened, I hate that. I'm being honest. I hate that. It's so cheesy, it's so corny, and it didn't fit. It felt tacked on. You know how the ending of Hot Fuzz is tacked on purposefully because he's parodying how movies often have to go back for reshoots to change the ending because they were too depressing? That's what this felt like. But it seemed serious. I still stand by it being a good movie, but you see my frustration with it here. The acting is phenomenal. The writing, except for that ending, is phenomenal. The editing, the music, the directing, the style choices, the visual appeal of the whole thing, so flawless. But there felt like there was something missing from it, with the horror element not being there, and with that ending being so shitty, which is a shame because I enjoyed the movie. Not as a horror movie. It wasn't remotely horrifying. If you're going to watch it, you have to have ready in your head that this isn't a scary movie. It tries to be, but it's not. That doesn't mean the story isn't interesting, because I was invested in the story. I was interested in everything happening. The story was enrapturing, captured my imagination, and I loved the story. But I was never scared by it. I was never thrilled by it. It was just, ooh, wonder where this is going. Even though I've said some negative things about it, I still recommend it because it was a wild ride up until that ending. I wish it ended a scene earlier. You know what? Just leave it ambiguous, cut to black after they're being taken out of the burning house, or leave them in the burning house. I don't care. That ending was unfortunate. So that's what I had to think. I'm sorry this was a little bit more loosey-goosey and all over the place than these sometimes are, but it was something worth thinking about, something worth pondering. And, you know, that's a good thing, too. I enjoy movies that make you think, whatever the reason. If it's memorable, it's memorable. And this movie was memorable. Once again, the visual style maybe being the most memorable thing about it. You see a lot of these shots in the trailer of like the bleeding eye makeup around her eyes in various scenes. All of that was beautifully shot. The dancing, there was this dance scene that like, it looked like Tarantino tapped Edgar Wright on the shoulder and said, hey, let me direct this scene. It was just, I enjoyed all of it. Except the ending. So, yeah, that's what I think. Like I said, what did you guys think though? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks guys. Bye.